Hi, I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you're listening to Wild Voice, the podcast where I take this voice of mine and share my wild journey with you. Being widowed at 34 with a 15-month-old, most would see as life ending. And instead, I alchemized it and put life back together, and it became more beautiful and fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. Through this life shift of mine, I realized who I am and what I'm here to do. I'm an intuitive energy healer, and sharing how I view the world is how I help you upgrade your life and alchemize your journey into magic. From day one, I wanted to share my journey, call it intuition, but I knew it was going to do more good out in the world than keeping it to myself. So when I say I've mastered life, that doesn't mean I'm perfect or that life is. I mean, I've mastered the concept of life, and I want to share that with you. Hello, everyone. On today's episode, I'm talking with my therapist and someone who is practically like family to me, Dr. Nancy Rogine. She has a Ph.D. in clinical psychology and a master's degree in marriage and family systems from Sonoma State University. She has been a psychotherapist in private practice for 35 years, focusing on recovery from childhood trauma and relationship skill building to pretty much anything you can imagine her and I have tackled together. She also practices as a life coach. She is a mother, a grandmother, and a licensed minister in her church with a focus on spiritual growth. She is deeply involved in working for racial justice in America, and her book, On Fire for Racial Justice, Healing Racism Within and Without, is due to be published this year. I started seeing Dr. Nancy consistently just a couple days after Bob died, and we're coming up on 5 years of this wild ride of working together. She has seen me through it all and is a huge part of integrating what I learn and am healing through. She is that perfect balance of giving me that human brain perspective and helping me understand on the why things happen the way they do and why they feel the way that they do. Or, in other words, are just a bitch to process. I see her as a huge part of my healing journey, and I'm excited to share her with all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Nancy. Oh my gosh, I couldn't tell when I first saw that if that was a picture of you in real life, like if that was you, or if that's just the best picture ever. Is that your picture?
It's a picture, but it's good, isn't it?
It is. I feel like you're looking at me, and it's a
It,
beautiful
wa-
picture.
it was a snap from a video, the video that I made to submit with my book when I was doing a book proposal.
Uh-huh.
And so I was talking and I was kind of my animated self. And then that's a snap from the video.
Oh my gosh, I love it. It's
I do
nice to
too.
see you. It's nice to see your face, even if it's in a picture.
Well, I didn't put on so I'm on Orcas Island
Uh-huh.
and my internet, it's so weird. We're doing this today of all days. But anyway,
Uh-huh.
I wasn't sure my internet would be stable. So I'm sitting by a coffee shop where I have Wi-Fi, because I've been on and I have internal Wi-Fi. So anyway, but I have to be by a good signal. And I wasn't sure if I put my picture up, do you want me to put my picture up?
This is perfect. You could either
Oh,
one. We won't really use it. It's just for talking, but I do record the audio, but that's the only thing I use.
yeah. Well, it's just before we hang up, let me switch so I can really see you and you can see me, but we can
Mhm.
just do the podcast part this way because then I won't run out of, it won't be such a
Yeah.
load. It won't, the facial video part takes a lot of energy from the phone and it's
Yeah.
harder.
I'm just so glad we got to see when I get to see your face, but I get to hear your voice. I'm just so excited. So I want to share you with everybody because I just love you to death. And I said in the intro that you're like family to me.
Oh,
So that it's just there's no other way to describe it. Like you're just like part of my family. And I find you so magnificent at what you do for a bunch of reasons, right? I'm going to talk about all the reasons why I love you. This is our favorite part of our time together, right? And I just want other people to see that they can have really positive experiences and people in their corner and in their support system or on their behind the scenes team that can help them through things. And I think there's this traditional mindset we have about therapy that deters a lot of people from it. And I think you're a beautiful example of all the things combined in one and how it can be such a pleasant, helpful experience. So
Mm.
that's why I wanted to talk today, because I want to share with people your perspective and the way that you do things so they can have, an understanding and even just a little piece of an opportunity to work with you and hear what you have to say. So my first question, because I want people to get an idea of what I mean, like what I'm talking about. And how would you say that you approach sessions with clients with all of your experience and your credentials and your intuitive knowing and your spiritual understanding to help them the best? Because I can say for me, it feels like a very well rounded um, experience with you. Like the sessions and our time together is very much so open minded, yet you have so much experience and so much amazing knowledge that you have really good ways of describing and explaining. And I'm sure you know that, but how would you say your method is of working with people? Because I think people have a very basic traditional understanding of what therapy can be.
Wow. Well, that's a great beginning, Marlo. I I would say, and I'd have to say it probably originates in my spiritual background, but I see every new person that I get a chance to work with as a treasure trove, a mystery, a person, a human being filled with potentiality. And so I'm more interested in who this person can be, what's inside of them, what they're dreaming of, what they're longing for, than I am in just the problems they're presenting. I think traditional therapy was based on illness. It's like the illness model from Western medicine. It was based on the idea that there's something wrong with you, you're deviant, you're not according to the norm. But I don't look at people like that at all. I don't even really diagnose people very much. Of course, the presenting problems are why people get help. If they don't have something pop up that is a disturbance, then they're just going to stay on the kind of same old path. So disturbances are crucial in life. And yet that's not who we are. We are bigger than our disturbances. So I'd say the first thing is the way any healer, I mean, I make a division between being a therapist and being a healer. And a healer of any branch of life, whether it's acupuncture or teaching Zumba, if you're a real healer, you're seeing people as filled with potential and light and mystery and beautiful gifts. You're not seeing them as a problem. They just have problems.
I love that because I think a lot of us think we are our problems or our actions or our thoughts. And I think the fact that you're able to help people understand why we feel that way, because that's what I love about some of our times together is I ask you questions because it's so fascinating to me how the brain works and how we put ourselves in these boxes or these I am this just because I did this action. And that
Mm-hmm.
sends us down a rabbit hole, right? That's not helpful. So how would you help somebody that is stuck in that way, which a lot of us are? I think I obviously still even have moments like that where take what we've done or our actions or something we feel bad about or wish we didn't do or felt like we knew better but didn't act on that. How would you start to get someone to kind of pull themselves out of that moment enough to maybe reach out for help or enough to maybe understand how the human brain, processes things to be like, oh, okay, I'm not broken. This is normal. This is why I'm feeling this way. And it would be beneficial to connect with someone, whoever that might be, whether that's you or a friend or a family member or another, health professional, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
How would you start get someone to just kind of get out of their own way enough to see that someone else might be able to help them kind of pull through something like that when we
Well,
get ourselves there?
that's a very good question. And it all has to do with labels and framing. I think people do instinctively, most people reach out to someone, even isolated uh, people who, I don't want to say live in a cave, but people,
Yeah.
the hermit mentality.
Yeah.
I had a client yesterday who said her very psychologically disturbed father-in-law comes and tries to talk to them about his problems. So people will reach out to the guy at the bar they're sitting next to, or they'll reach out to a family member, or they'll try to get their kids to listen to their problems, or they'll tell someone maybe at church. But the trouble is, a lot of people are prejudiced against reaching out for, in quotes, professional help. And I think it does help. I make a distinction between therapy and coaching. Like,
Mm-hmm.
people understand that if you want to be a better tennis player, you might hire a coach. If you want to swim better, or, all the famous athletes, all the Olympic athletes, they all hire coaches. No one has any stigma about that, becoming a better baseball player,
Mm-hmm.
um, basketball player. So why can't we use that for psychological growth and emotional growth that a coach, a life coach, and a lot of what I do is considered psychotherapy, but it actually could also be called life coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think psychotherapy is more where someone has a really difficult life problem that's impeding their functioning. And then the coaching comes in when people solve their problems. Like, let's say they repair their marriage, or they get a divorce, or they are finally able to have a baby, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then, then the coaching comes in where you help people see what their life could be and how they can expand it, and how you can gently nudge somebody. Sometimes if you say, would you talk to a life coach instead of a therapist, it might help someone say. Sometimes if you go with them, sometimes you can say to your mother who's having trouble accepting, that her husband died, why don't I go with you, mom, to see a therapy coach, life coach
Mm-hmm.
person? um, we can make it easier for people.
That's perfect. I think do you find if someone were to say, well, you're telling me I should go see, let's say if this is just a hypothetical, if someone said that and then someone came back with, well, do you see anybody? And let's say they say no, let's say for some reason, not that anyone's life is perfect, but for them, they haven't gotten to that point. And if they have, it's probably an easier conversation. But if someone hasn't, is that an opportunity, I think, to share with people? I have found that no matter if life is good or, quote unquote, tough or bad, that it's helpful to have someone in your corner regardless, because stuff doesn't have to just go, batshit crazy to think that, oh, maybe I should get someone to help support me through this. Sometimes it's great to already have them established to continue life in the direction you want it to go. And that's what I would love to share with people. What are your thoughts on people? Because it seems silly to be like, life is good. Okay, I should get a therapist or a life coach, but I think there's some magic, in that, and knowing
Well,
that. What do you think
that,
about that?
that kind of brings me to one of my life philosophies, which is, uh, evolving our consciousness is probably the reason we're here on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Evolution is the purpose of systems keep getting more complex. And that means if we're really making the most of our time here on the planet, we will do, we will have more vibrancy in life and experiences if we keep growing. And I mean that in two categories: kind of growing our mind, learning
Mm-hmm.
new skills, learning how to think, learning new information, and growing our hearts. So that means growing past our tendency to be revengeful. That means help with how can I forgive people, with how can I have better communication skills, so many people don't have to forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's like the growth principle is one of my key life orientations. And I think if, but you see, the irony is the higher functioning that we are, the more we realize having resources ahead of time, having people turning to others. But right there, Marlo, many people feel threatened about turning to others. They feel like, I mean, consciously saying, I could use some skill sets. They feel like that means there's something wrong with them instead
Mm-hmm.
of like, I can do better. So the higher functioning we are, the more we relish the idea of people on our team and people that will help us and people on hand for when I realize I'm in a growth spurt or I could learn more, right?
Mm-hmm.
So isolated we are, and the more we're struggling, the harder it is for people to reach out. And that's why people mostly reach out when they're in a crisis.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think
That's
that's the,
that's
oh, go ahead.
that's kind of the purpose of a crisis, is to force us out of our comfort zone and to grow. I mean, when you think about it, we would all just be like little amoebas, just living on a barnacle or a little barnacle living on the side of a ship, and we would not evolve if we didn't have challenges.
Right? That's what pushes us to be like, oh, okay, I think I could use some help here. And I
So
think,
I keep cutting you off, but another of my life philosophy is
mhm.
when lemons arrive on your doorstep, learn the recipe for lemonade. I mean, we have to understand that life is a combination of the choices we make, which is critical to our well being, and the things that get just dumped on our lap just happen to us that we didn't choose. We really didn't have a vote in it. And those are usually the more difficult ones. You know, my wife just told me she wants to leave me, or my son hasn't spoken to me for 3 years. I mean, these are the things where people are in torment because it happened to them. They didn't feel they voted for this. And that's where learning to work with the shadow side of ourselves and the tragedies of life is it transforms our whole life if we realize that choose as we are guided, learn to accept the things that are thrown to us that we're going to have to work with even though we didn't want to.
I think that's amazing. I think if people understood too that the more successful people are, people in business or any facet of life, they most of the time have a big team behind them that supports them to keep them on their path and to continue to roll through life as things come up. Because no matter how
Mm-hmm.
much help we have or how big our team is, we still have things in life that come up, and we just tend to have more, accumulate more tools to feel more empowered to handle things, in the moment, in the emergency type situations on our own. And I know that's what's been really helpful for me. But then I also have this space open where I'm like, okay, I got through this moment. I also would like to continue to move through it, or maybe make sure it doesn't happen this way again or not feel this way again. Let me reach out to my people to help me see what maybe I can't see in the moment, to continue to just evolve, like you said, evolve and just continue to move through things more effortlessly, because it's not like anything stops,
I,
you
I
know.
think what you're saying is related to a new consciousness and a new way of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
because in an older sociology, some people 100 years ago never went farther than 20, 50 miles away from their hometown, if that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we had horse and buggy. A lot of people never left town. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
really, we're in a whole new technological era where we have jet planes and we can be in Paris in 8 hours, and um, family and friends and kin circles are not the whole circle of our life anymore. The whole idea that a lot of young people have of I'm not I'm making my family through the friends I choose. I'm creating a friendship family.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that people would never have said 200 years ago. It's
Mm-hmm.
a Yeah. And this idea of a team, it's like relationships of all types. But we have to also admit it's partly based on financial abundance. I mean, I'm not going to be able to hire a chiropractor, a naturopath, a private Zumba teacher, and my fantastic life coach, which would be me, unless I have the resources. So that's why I'm saying these are the ways of thinking when we have more economic security, which
Mm-hmm.
is not a thing, you know, in most of human history.
Mm-hmm.
And think in terms of I can have relationships with people and I pay them for their time and their wisdom and their expertise. But this is when we're high functioning, not when we're struggling, addicted, don't have a penny to our name.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends where we're at on the journey.
What would you recommend to someone who maybe, let's say they come across this podcast or someone sends it to them, or someone talks to them about it and they're in that position, or they don't have, let's say, insurance to hire someone like you, or they don't have the funds to do a one-on-one healing session. What would be your resource for them in that immediate moment as they kind of build to
I, I,
this opportunity?
I would say there are resources available to every single human being.
Mm-hmm.
Get advice from the wife of our pastor for free. We
Mm-hmm.
can, we just have to open up. I mean, and Marlo, it all goes to our self esteem. If we don't think we're worthy of asking people for help, looking at the resources in our community. Most people can find a very low cost or cheap community center exercise class or have availability to do one online. We can network and meet with people, whatever our economic level is. We just start where we are. We reach out to those nearest us. We find out what they could offer us. Maybe somebody would take us to a Zumba class with them. I mean, there are resources, but we have to believe that we're worth it. And that's the hard part, I think, is for people to say, I need to invest in myself. I'm worth it. Because
Mm-hmm.
down, a lot of people are growing up without enough. Like we're all like little flowers waiting to be watered and fertilized. And if we grow up without enough, we kind of don't know what it feels like to be fully watered and fertilized.
Yeah.
And we have to learn. But so we just reach out for that nourishment wherever it may be, whatever little bright spot, a child that loves us, a neighbor that cares, a church family that will take us in, even if we're struggling. These, self-help groups, AA is free. I mean, a lot of people who are struggling have a major addiction in their life.
Mm-hmm.
We turn to addictions because we don't have that healthy growth pattern going for us yet. And we're leaning towards addictions, whether it's being codependent on our relationships or getting involved in substances or working all the time and not taking a breath for people. All of these off-center addictive processes are trying to kill the pain within us, the difficulty of not liking ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
not of nourishment and self-love. It's very hard to love yourself when you didn't get that reflection
Mm-hmm.
from. So I think we just seek it out. If we need love, let's admit it and look for it. And I don't just mean romantic love. I mean being loved for ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
romantic can be a path to that,
Mm-hmm.
but it often can also be its own set of steps of hell, right?
Yeah. I know. And I think you're touching on such a beautiful point because you know, you've been on this journey with me since day one, literally days after Bob
Yeah.
died. You and I was in your office and we practically have been talking every week for the most part ever since, like whether that's a text or an email or something. And
Yes.
um, it's been a beautiful evolving, I have felt to kind of see where because I obviously, how it felt to kind of start this process. And I was like at rock bottom, right? There was no ego. There was just, let me tell you what's going on and just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Like, I just don't want to feel this way anymore. And we've worked through so many other things as I kind of went on my spiritual journey and learned things. And we always have this connecting point of you doing a really amazing job of explaining the whys of things. And I don't know if it's for everybody, but I can speak for myself, is that really helps me understand myself more and understand the why, just the why. And I think sometimes that's even like with kids, they don't stop asking you a question until you've given them enough information to kind of resolve that why or that curiosity in their brain. And that's why a lot of parents go crazy because they kind of dismiss children. Let's say if they're asking the same question over and over again, but they're not giving them enough substance to understand and like
Mhm.
take the answer with, to take it and
Right.
just calm down, calm that nervous system down. And you do an amazing job of that and explaining the part of self love being so huge. Is that the interesting piece? Is that was kind of where my journey started as well. Once Bob died, I had to start back and be like, okay, I need to get back, on my own team. I need to understand myself. I need to realize
Mhm.
how I've been talking to myself, how I treat myself, and kind of rebuild that relationship to me. And so what you're explaining is just so powerful because no matter what you believe in or what you've been through, it is kind of that first step. And you touched on as children, like as we grow up in our childhood and you told me one time in a session, we were talking about childhood experiences and one specifically. And you had said that those are so powerful because it's our brain. I'm going to have you describe that part because I don't have the PhD here. But what I want you to explain and what I found so magical to this day, even, is how those are so powerful. And on the other side, being a parent, understanding that we do things, right? We feel like we mess up sometimes, we say the wrong thing, we don't respond the right way. So I guess the question is, what is it that happens when we're young and those first experiences that are so impactful? And when they happen, know that they don't have to be a death sentence, that maybe what your advice would be, whether it's a parent or it's happening to you, and kind of how to know that this happened and now what am I going to do with it? Because again, like you said in the beginning, our experiences and what happened to us don't define us. It's kind of how we move through it and what we choose to do with it.
Yes, I really understand what you're saying about early childhood experiences are the core imprint that we start, you know, our life out with. So, just like I said, our lives are a combination of what we choose. And I can't stress choice enough because we're always having choice points.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's just about our attitude towards things that are happening to us. But also, every child is a combination of their inner light, their inner potential, their inner talents, their inner psychology, the whole way their personality tendencies are constructed, and an interaction with the world around them. So I think probably the most important thing for children is it's not even if they might experience a traumatic event, because life is filled with traumatic events. It's how do they get enough support to bear up under it, to work with it, to learn the path of growing as a young person. If it's just trauma and nobody ever reaches out and says, how did you feel about that, honey? Or I bet you're sad that somebody ran over your bicycle in the street. Tell me how it feels. I mean, we can help kids process life so that it doesn't just become all frozen inside the brain and inside the limbic emotional centers, never to be revealed until you're 25 and you're having a disastrous relationship life.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think, that idea that children need wings and roots is really pretty good philosophy. They
Mm-hmm.
need to be grounded. They know that somebody loves them. Um, a bigger circle of love is always helpful. And then that rootedness and also the wings and the inspiration of believing in them and their talents and encouraging that. And then I think the other big part of the recipe is trying to keep your eye out for trauma that may be coming from outside sources, whether it's a stepfather, a school, a bad priest. We have to try to protect our children from massive trauma, the kind that destroys you so young you never do recover.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you find, is it because that imprints in the brain in a way that like creates this neural pathway that you just can't get off of? Or is it something that you think, if addressed in a combination of ways, can kind of be, it's there, but it cannot be this like
Well,
something that's in your face all the time?
the brain is a two-part creature. The
Mm-hmm.
cognitive uh, cerebral brain is later in evolution than the original limbic brain. And inside the limbic brain are all our key, more organic, basically almost biological responses: fear, being startled, uh, being anxious when separated from mommy, being endangered if we're separated too far from our tribe or our early family group. These early things, if there's a wider range, like maybe something traumatic happens, but then there's love and protection and care that's also lodged in the limbic brain. It's all getting lodged in there. So
Mm-hmm.
if a child basically just has loneliness and trauma, that's going to be very different than if they have some trauma or some difficulties, but they have support and care and empathy and fun times
Mm-hmm.
and bubble baths and joy along with other things. So the more that the limbic emotional brain, where these deep lessons are learned, has some resources in it, then the better the recipe is for a life well lived. I think I told you once the research that if a child can say one adult has stuck with me through my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they make it. These are the kids that make it, no matter how terrible their situation in the ghetto or in a crime filled neighborhood or, a white enclave of meth addiction. If there's a somewhat healthy human being that's there for you and believes in you, that's the recipe for, believing in yourself, which is the key to feeling like you can overcome your circumstances. But I wanted to tell you one other thing, Marlo. And
Mhm.
by the way, you're just a wonderful person to be in relationship with. And I wanted to just allude to the fact that it's a joint partnership, the journey of growth. And when we turn to wisdom people to help us on our way, we feed it. We're part of that decision. That's a choice. And then it's an interactive healing is an interactive process. It's not some authority figure telling us what to do or telling us, hey, I know more than you do.
Mhm.
So that is not my approach. And I bring my whole self to the table. I obviously can't tell my whole life story to every client, although sometimes I try to, but I, I do bring all the lessons I've learned, the traumas
Mhm.
I've experienced, the lemonade that I've created
Mhm.
to the table. And I think that's a comfort to people. And that's why it's not just me sitting there listening, taking notes, and then saying, well, go home and try this. It's not a
Yeah.
medical model, it's a spiritual, interactive, psychological model that values sorrow and trouble as much as it does joy and enlightenment. And that's why it feels so different and has a different flavor. So, my advice would be look for a healer,
Mhm.
not just someone with a professional tag, but someone who will love you, even
Mhm.
through the professional relationship. You can feel that their heart is in it.
Mhm. I love that. That's beautiful. And that's definitely how I feel with you. So, anyone who has worked with you or will work with you in the future or read what you share in the books that you're writing, I think it shows very openly that you're so open minded in a way that you make it a safe space. And you also hold the container for the structure and the growth opportunity and the advice. And you brought up like tools and giving people something to take from the session, because I know
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times people have sessions with professionals and it becomes more of a just sit there and talk and then you leave and then there's nothing here. You've just stirred up all the emotions and you haven't taken any tools to now either bring yourself, back into balance or to what to do with how you're feeling from there now that you go back into the real world that might not feel like it has this safe container all the time. You help create that safe container within the individual and you give tools. And I find that to be very rare also with the experiences I've had with therapy and what I hear from other people. So I think, is that just a unique approach within you, or is that something you found with time? Because you do, I felt like anytime I've left a session, there hasn't been a time where you haven't given me another reference or a book to check out or a person to, research or a tool from your experience to kind of put in my back pocket and play with. I know we've even had moments where you notice when we're like in person or on Zoom and you can tell I'm not writing it down and you're like, okay, I have more. You write these down. Like I have more to give you. So you definitely give tools and resources, which I feel like is very unique that I have in my experience. And so, yeah. So, what is that something that you just think has always been a part of your practice, or is that something you realized with time that you wanted to give to people to kind of facilitate in the healing?
Well, I think it goes back to the core philosophy that this is a joint project and that our evolution, our growth, our experiences are continuing, and that the life coach therapist is uh, a point of energetic renewal or interaction, but the journey is within each of us. So yes, we want to be always looking for new resources, books to read, groups to attend, classes to take, and some of it depends on how eager the person is for those resources. You've always been an eager beaver, Marlo. So always questing to learn more and know more. So, and then the idea of sharing what the tools that have worked for me or that I have come across. And because I'm always growing, and that's one of my life principles is to keep growing. And when I said earlier, keep growing the brain.
Mhm.
So only maybe 10 years ago, I got into brain research, but it's transformed my practice. And
Mhm.
a friend turned me on to this book called A General Theory of Love, and it describes how the emotional brain works and how the cognitive brain works. And then ever after that point, when I read that book, I was a different, I added that into my therapy. So every time I learn something, my therapist, for better or worse, whether they like it or not, they're going be the recipients of my newfound wisdom, because I'm excited to share. I think I think interactive therapists and research is showing that people prefer therapists who share a little bit about themselves, that they
Mhm,
disclose, not just a frozen stick figure,
mhm.
not to the point where you're hopefully asking your therapist to counsel you. Although sometimes I've said to people, maybe you charge me. I mean, I should. Um, so,
Exactly.
but hopefully not going that far
Hmm.
to another approach. And I wanted to tell you that I have a little something we could offer the listener.
Hmm.
Uh, I, in with all the interesting questions you asked me before this chance to speak together, I came up with a little handout called a recipe, my recipe for gathering wisdom, uh,
Yes. Sounds
a life.
magical. I've never heard this before. I don't think we've ever talked about this. I'm
No, I
ready.
just created it this morning. So I have a handout that you could, somehow figure out how to disseminate to your
Hmm.
listeners that lists these main bullet points of the principles, the life principles that I think have led me to increasing wisdom over the years and
Uh-huh.
to uh, what I feel is a beautiful way to be a healing in the healing arts and to help others on their way as others have helped me.
Oh, I love it. I'm ready. Are you going to share some of them now, or is it something they just send or show for the listeners?
Well, I think I've been kind of saying them, how
Yeah.
we with what we choose as well as what gets sent to us,
Hmm.
the birds that are not that we did not vote for.
Hmm. Hmm.
We make plans and God laughs and something else pops up.
Right.
So and that the shadow of life, the difficulties and the troubles are just as important as the joys, maybe more important because they guide us for what we need to learn. Ask anybody that's had a terrible tragedy and come out the other end, and they will all say, this changed my life for the better, and I wouldn't give up the cancer that I recovered from. I wouldn't give up the death of my partner. I wouldn't give up that my child was born with Down syndrome because these have been my life's greatest learnings. But you have to embrace it. You have to say, I'm going to vote for what comes my way that I must deal with, you know,
Hmm.
as well as the excitement of what we choose. And listening to our intuition and knowing, and following that is a
Hmm.
very critical part of life, Marlo,
Oh,
because we have a little voice inside of us always saying, this way. We're born with a blueprint, but society covers it over, parents cover it over. That's another thing we can do for our children is try to listen to what their inner voice is, what their little blueprint is telling them. If they
hmm.
love art, and just because you wanted them to grow up and play for the NFL, you'd better listen to their love of art when they're little,
Hmm.
you know?
I love that. You're speaking my language, that intuition. And we've talked so much about this. So I know we could talk about that for days and days. That just lights me up. I totally agree. And I think you're so spot on with that, that following, they tend to know better than us parents do and what they need or want. And obviously we've had conversations about this to support them and be that, foundation and structure. And there's also a point, which is kind of a fine line to dance, where we have to let them be their own people and let them show us and help us parent them by kind of listening to what they say or what they show us with their actions, whether that's behavioral or whatever they want to do.
I think the highest summit of the brain is known to be thinking both this and that at the same time, what we call both and thinking instead of either or. As the
Mhm.
brain, our emotions evolve, we're better able to hold two disparate thoughts in our brain at the same time. So we need to respect the child and their inner blueprint and their voice, their personality. And we also need to respect ourselves and set boundaries and say no. Vitamin no might be the most important vitamin you can give your child. If you grow up without enough no's, you can never say no to yourself. And that's a path for addiction.
That's a magical point because that's something you and I have talked about, not necessarily that specifically, but me kind of playing with the intuition and the spirituality piece and the fluidity of Nash being his own person and me being his parent, and also creating that structure, but not stifling it with me telling him what to do. And but yet there's also a place for that, right? We've talked about this. There's also a time where I have to put my foot down and I have to say the no's, and this is how it's going to be. So he also feels that safety in knowing that he's not in charge, in the sense of he's not in the
Mhm.
world solo. I'm here to protect him. And there is some comfort in him knowing that, but that does come with some no's.
Right. So if
But
we respect for my child and respect for myself and find the balance between that, we'll probably be okay.
yeah. And that just takes some figuring out, right? I think as a parent, we all figure it out, and just little, if we only knew that our parents really had no clue what they were doing. And even when we have a lot of resources, we still have to kind of stumble through it and figure it out. But with the couple more minutes that we have, the part that really fascinates me and what I really get to enjoy about our time together and your perspective on life and your experience and your knowledge is your understanding of how the brain works. And you mentioned, learning more about that and how that changed your practice. And that has changed my life. And it's funny, the things that really resonate with me. And that's very intriguing to me because I think when we understand certain parts about the brain, now, I work very fluid in life and not so much structure with how the brain works, but there is parts to it that really fascinate me. And I think if we understand how our brain operates, and everyone's so individualized by their experience and what they've gone through and their upbringing and beliefs and programming, that we tend to have, it's taught me a lot of compassion. And I kind of worked through that through my spiritual journey and the teachings, and as I became a healer. But I feel like this was a big part of it because it even helped when we were first talking about Bob and, his way of doing things and how he was being deceitful and not honest. And then we would kind of break down into pieces of maybe why he made those choices or why he got to that
Mhm.
point. And it removed a lot of the emotion from it because it became more of like, oh,
Mhm.
it's like it gave me the why. Right. And I think that was what my brain was searching for. Like, why? Why would someone do something like that? Why would they?
The
So,
framework, and it took away some of the stigma. You could see the sense of this common sense almost behind his behavior, given his background, even though it was unhealthy. But yeah, exactly. And I think we're living in a miraculous time. We really underestimate. Why do we know so much more about the brain? Because of brain imaging. And that all goes to new technology. And I think GPS and things that came into the world when we went to the moon, because we can do things with technology and imaging that were never available before. We know about the brain in a way. We can do tests on people and see when their brain lights up, and how male brain tends to light up in very different ways than the female brain. We can understand ourselves so much better because of technological advances. It's a miraculous time. I mean, these new books on the brain didn't just happen. They were only possible because we have more information. So revolution, not just for you and for me and how we see ourselves, but for our whole planet. If
mhm.
we understand ourselves better from how the brain works, then we wouldn't have so many judgments. We wouldn't have so much stigma. We wouldn't have so much division. Um, I'm very, very interested in racial justice. And now we can do studies to see at what point do babies start to show aversion to someone from a different tribe or a different racial group, because they don't do that right away, but they soon learn from how people around them respond. But we can actually image their brains and
Mhm.
see that the brains are perfectly happy until a certain point comes along. So we can solve a lot of our social problems, just like science is helping to create solutions for our climate problems, we hope. Um, in the fields of social science and psychology, and everything about planet Earth depends on human psychology, Marlo. We have to love ourselves and love others to create a planet of peace and well-being and justice for all. I mean, it's going to come from higher level of consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
fighting wars and being tribal and expecting to have peace on earth, goodwill to all. So, the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing, the work that every individual that's growing is doing, moving out of only the ego is very important, but moving out of it into a higher level of consciousness, that's the work of the planet right now. And it's either going to save us or it's not. But without it, we cannot transform our planet. So this is the work that we are called to do at this stage of human evolution.
And I'm so excited to be doing it with you.
Thank you,
This
Marco.
Gosh, okay, last little thing, and it will be because I find it again so fascinating. And I did an episode on masculine and feminine energies, and you brought it up briefly, how the brains light up differently. And I think this could be a little sprinkle of something people could take away, let's say for relationships or even parenting, because you and I have had this conversation when it comes to me just parenting Nash, me being a female and him being a male. And we've talked about I use too many words sometimes because the female brain over explains and like all these things, and the male brain tends to shut off at a certain point and it's too many words. And Nash has actually said that to me at some point. He just tells me too many words, mom, and I'm like, oh, okay, like brings me back to reality that we're very different.
Uh,
And so is there anything that could kind of sum up in a way or give an example of, you mentioned the male and female brain, or we've talked about the yin and yang, however you want to describe it, how it lights up differently, and it actually, like, we process differently, we hear differently, and we tend to get frustrated in relationships when we feel like we're literally speaking a different language. And a lot of the time we are, and we have to learn and kind of figure out how to work with each other. And that could be in a work relationship, it could be a romantic relationship, a parenting dynamic. I mean, it goes for anything. But do you have something that could lead people to
well,
be like, oh, I get that?
it'd be dangerous to generalize or make it sound
Mm-hmm.
like it is like this, because what it can be generally true is not necessarily always individually true.
Mm-hmm.
So respect the individual and their particular combination of things.
Mm-hmm.
But when we do brain studies of the average typical male or the average typical female, or I have read studies about gay men,
Mm-hmm.
the brains of gay men, for instance, seem to work very differently than either the male or the female. I mean, it's a whole new thing into itself.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, we can understand some of the differences that we see are not fabricated or made up or just cultural. They do go back to the brain imaging. In general, the male brain tends to be more uni-focused, and female brains tend to have. So I liken it to like the man has one big strobe light blaring in his brain when he's focused on something.
Mm-hmm.
Females tend to have 5 or 6 little lights, like sitting around a campfire.
Mm-hmm.
And we're pretty much sure that the millions of years of evolution where men went out and hunted and had to focus has created that kind of a brain. And women who needed to be multitasking and taking care of the kids and keeping them from falling into the fire and putting the soup pot on the stove or the over the campfire and gathering herbs in between, learned their brain evolved into more relationship consciousness and more very many different tasks that we can attend to fairly well, not all at the same time, but quickly in sequencing. Men, not so much. They don't do as a lot of men do not do well with. I know my son, if I tell him a task to do, he doesn't want to be interrupted and told to do another task right at the same time. It confuses him.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he likes a list so he can see what he's going to be doing and so he can focus.
Mm-hmm.
So just in general, a different way that the brain has strengths and that female orientation, that general female orientation, not all females are good at this, has certain values, right? When multitasking. But men can often have a better one pointed, let's get this done. Let's not lose the main point here. Keep our eye on the prize. So we just need to mix and match. We need to learn from each other and value our strengths and not make judgments about the areas where we're not as strong.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's perfect. I think that can go for anything, right? I think that pretty much sums
Things.
up what we can do going, and live our life from here on out. So I think that's
So I will send
magical.
you my handout called Recipe for Gathering Wisdom.
Okay. Would love it.
And then maybe somehow people can access it through your website or
Yeah,
whatever if they're
absolutely.
interested. And it will have some of the points that I covered today in there and
Perfect.
more.
I love it. Oh my gosh, Dr. Nancy, I just love you so much and I appreciate you. And I'm just so excited that we're in each other's lives and I get to keep learning from you.
I love you,
So,
Marlo.
oh, well,
Yeah.
thank you. And I'll let people know how they can, just out of curiosity, are you taking new clients or do people learn about what you're doing
And
through the books you're putting out?
I am. What happens is every once in a while, somebody who's been coming every week decides to come twice a month, or people who've been coming monthly for a long time will, or coming twice a month for a long time will decide, I think, just once a month for right now. And
Mhm.
so will open up. So I keep weaving new people. I just started working with a new family this week and I'm very excited about them.
Good. Okay, wonderful. So I'll make sure I put all of your information so people know how to get a hold of you.
Thank you.
And you have a book coming out. I had
Yes,
mentioned that. And I'm so excited as this stuff starts to unfold. And I know you've been working on it for quite some time. So I'm excited to see all your wisdom on paper.
and you have a book coming out, don't you, Marlo?
Yes, I'm working on it. And it's, as you know, the writing process, you want to get something done. That doesn't always mean your brain is going to be on board with getting it out on paper.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Well, we'll commiserate together about the writing process.
Yes, exactly. We understand each other's pain points. But
Marlo, for choosing me to be with you today and for this wonderful chance to think many things through together. I really appreciate it.
oh, I loved it. So I can't wait to talk to you next time.
Thank,
And
thanks.
I will talk to you later.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for being here. Please rate, like, share, and review so we can stay connected and continue this magical journey together.